All right, what's up, guys? Jeff Campy here with Wealth Energetics, back doing some more content with my good friend Matt from Millennial Wealth Creator. Thanks for joining me tonight, Matt. We're doing another mini late night session here. We're almost at 10 o'clock Eastern time, so that's the way we roll. So
It's never too late to do content, brother.
heck
Sign
no.
me up anytime.
I know, man. Makes me think of our DR nights, midnight, 1 a.m.
Oh yeah, those are the best, man. You can't beat them.
I know. So today we're going to jump into talking a little bit about some current events going on. We're in the beginning of April 2025. We've had some tumultuous days in the stock market recently, and you read the headlines and it's disaster. The sky is falling. Run for your life. We've had the worst day ever. And there's been some down days in the market, right? And so we're going to shed some light on that whole dynamic and maybe give you some things to think about, both pros and cons, and just different perspectives you maybe haven't thought about. If you've watched Matt and I before, we're usually sharing some different perspectives, the things that we've learned over the years, the things that we apply in our own life, the things that we help clients with. And we're going to kind of compare this a little bit with some of the steps that Dave Ramsey goes through, the 7 baby steps. Because there's a lot of good in that, and then we want to offer some different perspectives on some of those baby steps as well, as it fits into the discussion of the current economic environment where the stock market's, going down a little bit with some of the new administration coming in. Trump's made some, sweeping changes in ways that have ruffled feathers and disrupted the markets. And, short term, that could be bad. Long term, we'll find out, right? I don't have a crystal ball. It could go both ways. It could turn around and we could have still a really good economy for the next few years, or maybe some people will pull some punches and, purposely tank it on Trump, and who knows where we'll go. But definitely want to give you some good content tonight around this whole idea, just to give you some thoughts around, am I in the right spot mentally and doing the right strategies as it pertains to how I'm utilizing the stock market, because it probably should be part of your portfolio. There's instruments that are tied to the or in your portfolio that are tied to the markets. They're the best ways to grow your money a lot of times. And, we're not financial advisors, so we're not going to tell you exactly what to do, obviously, but we're going to share with you strategies because we're wealth strategists and we want to give you some different points of view around this whole topic. So let's jump in. I'm going to go through one by one Dave's baby steps, and we're going to focus more on step 4 on the investing part, but we're just going to share some thoughts around, what Dave shares, because there's a lot of really good stuff in this. And, I don't know about you, Matt, but I know when I talk to clients, Dave is a lot of times the directional compass for people in their finances, because he's one of the biggest prominent figures, especially in the church community, which, a lot of people I talk to are, at least some way tied to that. And a lot of what people think about money ties back to what Dave teaches, and they don't think or haven't heard too many perspectives outside of those baby steps to see if maybe I should be doing maybe only steps 1 and 2 for myself, or maybe up to 3, and then I should maybe listen to somebody else for the rest of the steps. Or a lot of people have just never considered different thought processes. So that's what we're going to deliver tonight. Right. So step 1 in Dave's baby steps is to save $1,000, because a lot of people in America don't have any savings. It's the emergency fund is to swipe the credit card, and that can really not be a good starting point. So Dave says, if you're not saving, start working towards saving up that $1,000, because once you have $1,000, that at least gives you a little bit of a cushion if you need something to happen. I know recently, Matt, I've had a couple of vehicle repairs that, were kind of unexpected and turned into be more than I thought. The oil pan on my truck rotted out after 4 years, which is a common problem, but there's no warranty fix to that or recall for it. So I had to shell out for a brand new oil pan just out of the blue. All of a sudden I had puddles in my driveway one day. And those kind of things, if you have $1,000 laying around, boom, you can pay for it and you're not getting yourself into a debt cycle. So I don't think there's anything wrong that I can say about saving $1,000. It's a good starting point, I think. Any thoughts on that from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. There's a quote that I heard a long time ago and it just stuck with me. And it's progress is the greatest motivator in the world. I think it was Tony Robbins who said it. And I think the idea of saving $1,000 is great because it proves to yourself that you can start moving in the right direction with your finances. So I think it's a great first step in the right direction. I actually like the 7 baby steps for the most part. I disagree a lot on what happens after that, and sometimes just the way people go, the way he teaches going about those different steps. Right? You mentioned earlier that when we're on calls and we talk to people, that Dave Ramsey is kind of the compass, the go-to person that people follow with that. And his stuff is really good for getting you on the right track. It's not really great for building long-term wealth. It's a way of playing it safe, and maybe for some people that's fine. But if you think about, I think a good analogy sometimes with stuff like this is, if you think about our school system, right? Yeah, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, right? Well, when you graduate high school and go to college, you wouldn't continue listening to your elementary school teacher, would you? Right? So it's kind of the same thing with personal finance here, with Dave Ramsey stuff. It's great for getting your life on track, hitting that first $1,000 and getting moving in the right direction. All right, but once you have your life back on track and you've got some systems in place, you got some money saved up, maybe a little bit invested, that's fine. Now it's time to graduate and move on to more things that are more beneficial, strategic, efficient, right? Because there's some really great assets out there, financial vehicles we can use, strategies we can use to really accelerate the wealth building process. But at the end of the day, you have to start somewhere. And so I really like the idea of saving $1,000, because that gets you in motion and proves to yourself. It also starts to shift the mindset a little bit, the belief system, the internal belief system that, hey, I actually can start to take charge of my financial future here. So I actually really like that first step.
Yeah, that's a great point. You made me think back to a principle I learned several years ago. It's called like the momentum or success cycle, where when you take action and you get a success, it builds confidence. And like you said, builds your belief that, oh, I can do more. And when you have more confidence, it leads to more positive action typically. And when you get more positive action, you're going to get more positive results, which is going to give you greater belief, greater confidence, which is going to lead to even more activity. And it does help build that. So taking that first step and getting to even maybe for some people, it's the first $100 of savings. Right. And then 1,000, and being able to build on that and establish the habit of being a disciplined saver over, it might take you a year or two to get into that routine where, you're feeling the groove, but you can get there. And that first $1,000 target is really the way to help get you there. So yeah, really good points there. So step number 2 that Dave, outlines is paying off all of your debt. And from our perspective, I think that for a lot of people is the necessary first step. I think it depends a little bit on your cash flow. It depends a little bit on your situation. We come across people that are maybe chiropractors, or people that are, there's, several $100,000 moving through their hands in any given year because they've got good cash flow in their business. They've also got a lot of debt, and it could be business debt. It could be, they're just spending out of bounds. They're enjoying the jet skis and the quads and all that kind of stuff just because they've got the cash flow and they've got a bunch of loans for those things. They're not going about paying it with cash like Dave or other people would recommend. I think we probably would recommend a very similar process. Don't go getting yourself in debt, a ton of things for just luxuries and toys. But those types of people, it's not always the consumer debt. It can be just they financed a bunch of stuff, and loan after loan after loan after loan, they can get swamped in debt. And so there can sometimes be better strategies to pay off debt than just simply cutting up your credit cards, putting your credit cards in the freezer, and going about it kind of that way. Because part of it is addressing, why are you in debt? Is it right. Have a medical issue? Do you get divorced? I mean, is it like a major life thing? Or do you have a spending problem? Is there like some emotional need that you're needing to fulfill by going and buying stuff? Do you go clothes shopping too often? Are you buying stuff that you shouldn't, but it give you some emotional fix that, I'm just going to blow it anyway. And you've got this like self-sabotage pattern going on. Like those are right. That I don't usually hear Dave talk about that. Usually we like to go a little bit deeper with a client, like, hey, what's going on here? Like, let's get to know you at a deeper level than just stop going to Starbucks, take that money and put it on your credit cards. Like, well, what's driving this whole behavior to begin with? And if we don't ever get to that, you're going to be really fighting an uphill battle. So, I think I agree. A lot of times paying off debt is a good first step for some people, depending on where they're at. If they don't have the discipline, they haven't cultivated those habits yet, probably something to focus on first. But for other people, like I said, that have better cash flow, there might be other strategies that make more sense. It might be utilizing more of a cash value life insurance policy like we teach some of our clients to do, and more shifting cash flow and helping to accelerate the debt pay down in more of a expansive way than just cutting off, the Starbuckses and canceling Netflix and doing those types of things to free up money to pay on debt. it really comes down to who you are, where you're at in your life, and what's driving the debt. And are you at a point to be able to, manage your cash flow in a productive way to pay it down? Or do you really need to do more of like the Dave Ramsey method and like get your stuff together, figure your stuff out, and like really clamp down and say, you know what, I got to get more disciplined. I got to get things in order. And in order to get myself on track, I got to start paying stuff down. So those are a few of my thoughts around all that. What's your perspective on the debt pay down in step 2?
Yeah, I think it's another good place to start. Obviously, how you go about that, doing it in the most efficient way possible, is going to depend on your situation. But to talk about the mindset aspect of it really quick, because oftentimes there are some underlying issues that need to be addressed first before you even put a plan in place when it comes to like actually paying off the debt. You have to ask yourself, why am I in this debt in the first place? And Mark Moss did a great video on this the other day. I actually did a video breakdown on it where he talks about how the wealthy build wealth in multiple layers. And the first layer was cash value, dividend paying whole life insurance. It was really cool. But in that video, he talks about 3 different mindsets: the poor mindset, middle class mindset, and the wealthy mindset. And the poor mindset is like, and he related it to how people use leverage and credit. And so in a poor mindset, people are using, unfortunately, for credit to survive, credit and leverage to survive, because they just can't afford, they can't pay all their bills. They don't make enough income. Those emergencies or just life happens and they don't have the foundation in place, the savings in place to cover it. So they use credit cards to essentially survive, right? And it's really unfortunate. And that's a different set of problems that you have to address first, because if you start paying off debt but you haven't addressed the underlying issues, well, you're not going to get anywhere, right? So you have to figure out what got you into this position in the first place. That's so important. You need to start addressing that. So if you're in that phase, well, the income is the problem. You have to figure out how to make more income, and also, can you lower your expenses so you're not making the debt problem worse, right? The second mindset, the middle class mindset, these types of people use leverage and credit to increase their lifestyle, right? So that's where you get the people that make $100,000, $200,000 a year, but they're living paycheck to paycheck because they've levered themselves to the hilt, where they got to keep up with the Joneses, the nice house, the nice car, the boat, the trips, and all that. And there's nothing wrong, obviously, with living. I mean, we want to live. Otherwise, what's the point of making money, right? We want to go on the trips and we want to have nice things, whatever. But you have to do it strategically. And that's where the conversation would come into the difference between good debt and bad debt, right? Because there is a difference, right? And that leads me to the third mindset, which is the wealthy mindset, where those people use leverage and credit, debt, to acquire assets, income producing assets that will then increase their lifestyle, right? And so the mindset, depending on where you're at, it's really, really key. Because at the end of the day, these things are just tools. Credit cards, debt, loans, whatever, they're just tools. And if you use them the right way, it can really accelerate the wealth building process in your life. But if you're using it to survive, if you're using it to increase your lifestyle, well, that's something that those are problems that need to be addressed first, okay? And once the mindset is addressed, now we can, and obviously, I'm a big advocate of always increasing your income regardless of where you're at in life, in your financial journey. Always be increasing cash flow, income, etc., because it gives us a strong foundation to make more strategic moves when it comes to where we put our money, investing, etc. And obviously, we're also able to weather the different things that life throws at us much more efficiently. But once we have that in place, let's say we do have a lot of debt. Well, now we can start to figure out what is the most efficient way to get rid of this debt. For some people, it's going to be the snowball effect, or the snowball strategy, avalanche strategy. Like, there's different ways to do it. I'm a very big advocate of using cash value, dividend paying whole life insurance to pay off debt, but not everybody's in a position to use that. So the question would be, well, should I wait a long time until I'm in a position to do cash value life insurance, or should I start paying my debt off now? Well, in that case, I would say probably start paying your debt off. Because Garrett Gunderson talks about this too, where, or is it Garrett? It might be Garrett and Chris Nagel. They both talk about debt, where when you pay off that debt, that's like getting an instant rate of return, right? Because that money's no longer going out the window anymore. So if you're paying 25% interest on credit cards, but you're still putting money into a 401k, to try and get an average of 8, 9, 10%, whatever the market's going to do. Well, that doesn't make any sense because you're paying 25% interest over here. All right. So get that instant return first by paying off the debt in the most efficient way that you can. And then you move on to the next phase. Because if you're buried in debt, man, it is really, really hard to make strategic moves when it comes to building wealth and investing, because there's just so much weight of this debt. Once that's paid off, man, the world starts to become your oyster a little bit, and you sleep a lot better at night too. So I like that the paying off the debt is step 2. That gives instant return when you start paying those things off. Again, it comes down to progress being a great motivator. Like you see your debt starting to reduce, man, that feels really, really good. And when you finally hit that debt-free zone when it comes to credit cards, high interest debt, man, that feels really good. That makes you want to continue going forward. The only thing I would say is everybody's situation is different. So just because you have debt, that doesn't mean we just throw all of our cash at it. If there's a more efficient way to do it, which would be something like using a whole life insurance policy, we might want to explore that first, because when we do it that way, we're being more efficient. We're keeping the wealth within our own personal economy is what I call it. And there's just so many more benefits of doing it. That's how I consolidated my mother's credit card debt. She had 12 or 13 credit cards. Like, it was ridiculous. And we used my policy to pay it off instead of her own cash. Her credit score is over 700 now. I put $800 a month back into her pocket. Every time she makes a payment back to the policy loan, it immediately restores the cash value. My money's continuing to compound in the policy. Like, there's so many benefits to doing that versus just paying cash on the debt, right? So it comes down to your situation, but you got to fix the underlying issues first. So step number 2, I actually really like getting the debt under control.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. All great points. And I'm thinking back, you mentioned Garrett Gunderson in his books. He talks about one of the strategies to pay down debt faster. You hear Dave talk about the snowball effect. I think it's Susie Orman that talked about the avalanche. So those are like hitting the lowest, payment the hardest and getting that smallest debt paid off, because that starts giving you that confidence and that momentum. Sometimes it's paying off the highest interest rate first. That's like attack that. Garrett, he teaches, and I don't think it's his original concept, something called cash flow index. So you take the principal that you have, dividing it by the normal or minimum payment that you're making. And then if that number is above 50, it's an efficient loan, meaning it's not a drain on your cash flow. If it's below 50, it's an inefficient loan, and it's more of a drain on your cash flow. And so his strategy is looking at your debts and doing that calculation on every single debt. Like, I've got all my debts. We've got that in a spreadsheet. Like, I know every month where we're at, like I know which ones are the least efficient and put more on those if we need to, because sometimes we carry a credit card balance based on, cash flow of our own situation. We're not always perfect with all this stuff. But I know the score on that stuff. And when you know that, you can go, oh, this loan, even though it may not have the highest interest rate, or it may not appear like that's the one I should target first, it gives you that right in front of you. Like, this is the one I need to target because it's robbing the most cash flow from my budget every month. So I should allocate the most resources to that to free up more cash flow, because sometimes it's not the highest interest rate that is eating up your efficiency. Sometimes it's the efficiency of the overall loan and how much you're having to put towards the minimum payment or the regular payment according to how the balance is in your account. So that's a great way to do it. And again, no one size fits all. Some people, they may need to start with, I just need to hit the $100 account and pay that off to feel good about my situation. But other people that are a little further along and have the disciplines and have, maybe the cash flow to do that, they can look more at the cash flow index type of a situation and knock it out that way. And, I'm reminded too, as you were talking, of a couple situations that, I've seen in the people that we work with, where they've got capital to work with. Maybe it's locked up in a home equity line of credit that they already have, that is at a 7% interest rate, but they're paying 18, 19, 20% on credit cards. It's like, right. If you've got cheaper money, use the cheaper money to pay off more expensive money. Use the 7% to pay down that, because like you spoke to, it's an instant raise in a sense. Instead of spending 19%, you're only spending 7%. That's 12% rate of return in a sense. It's not directly that, but you can think of it like that of, hey, I'm saving money. And if I take that extra payment that I was normally making on the full 19% and make that on only the 7% loan, I'm going to knock that down way faster because more is going to principal capital, less is going to interest, and I'm going to make way faster headway. And that's kind of that snowball avalanche type of idea. But if you've got capital locked up, I mean, if you've got good credit and you've got maybe a vehicle that's paid off, that might be a avenue to explore. Talk to somebody about that. You know, hey, do that, grab that equity out of that vehicle, pay off your credit card debt, because that type of a loan can help boost your credit score. It could be a lot of benefits to that. And a lot of those types of scenarios comes down to, are you disciplined? Because you don't ever want to get in yourself in a situation where you took out another loan, or you're using a HELOC and then you didn't correct that underlying issue like we talked about, and you get yourself into more trouble. We never want to advocate that, of course. We want you to always be safe and secure and be conservative in these things, but there are a lot of times ways to accelerate the debt pay down. So we could probably talk for a long time on all that stuff, but let's jump in. Do you have another thought?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. I thought that was great. Yep. Good stuff.
Cool, man.
Move on.
So then Dave's third step is really what we would say in our framework, maybe going more from like an emergency fund into like an opportunity fund, where you're starting to not just put $1,000 away. Dave says save up 3 to 6 months of your lifestyle and your living and lifestyle for, you know, a bigger emergency fund. But we would say that might even start turning into an opportunity fund. Like you spoke to already, there can be sometimes good opportunities for you to make money, but if you don't have money to deploy when that opportunity arises, you might miss the opportunity. And so if you've got the emergency fund there, 3 to 6 months of living expenses, I know some of our mentors, the Chris's, Garrett, a lot of them talk about, you know, maybe even a year or two. Caleb talks about it as well from Better Wealth, you know, having a year or two in your personal, and if you have a business, even having the same thing in your business, having that year or two set aside of all of your business expenses, because that frees you up to do all kinds of things. You don't have to worry. And if you see the opportunity to pull the trigger on something, whether that's, you know, flipping equipment, which I know you've done, I've been looking at some of that myself, you know, just any opportunity that you have to maybe just scale your own business. If you've got money to pull the trigger on that, you know, you're going to be in a better spot, and, you know, just being able to do a lot more things with that. But I think one of the part of Dave's philosophy here is saving all this money is nobody ever asks, where should I be saving that? We all just default to go into a checking account, should go into a savings account, maybe a money market. Some people are probably doing money market, but have we ever asked, like, is that really our only options? Is that the best place? Are there other places out there? So I'll let you expand on that and any of the other thoughts that you might have, because I'm sure you'll have lots of thoughts on where should we spend our money.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I actually just did content today before we hopped on this call, talking specifically about this. And the question I always propose to people is, if you're going to save money, why not save it in the most efficient way possible? Now, when it comes to the baby step, right, getting that 3 to 6 months into a checking account, savings account, whatever, I think is a great step. So, and I'm pulling from my own personal experience here. When my business started to take off and I was actually able to save a good amount of money, I wasn't too concerned about where to put it just yet. My focus was just getting the money in the bank, right? It's step 2 of my Millennial Wealth Creator blueprint, is building the vault. It's just stacking cash, avoiding Parkinson's law, where as your income increases, your expenses increase as well. You should absolutely not be doing that. You want to be saving as much as you possibly can. And from there, once we have the 6 months saved up, okay, well, now we've got a decent pile of money here. Am I saving it in the most efficient way possible? No, probably not. If it's in a traditional savings vehicle, a savings account, CD, you know, maybe you save in treasury bills right now, whatever, because interest rates are okay. But historically speaking, these traditional savings vehicles are not very good. They're not very beneficial to us. You know, the interest is taxed every year. Usually the interest is pretty dismal to begin with. The only real benefit that we get is, and actually sometimes I wouldn't even call it a real benefit, is like instant access. We get a debit or ATM card. You can write checks on it. Maybe not if it's in a savings or CD, but then also that money's tied up as well if it is in a CD. Like, you know, if you were to take that out, oftentimes there's penalties for doing so. So these traditional savings vehicles, they benefit the bank far more than they benefit us. So the question is, okay, well, if that's the case, is there a better place to save my money? The answer is yes. Dividend, custom designed, high cash value, dividend paying whole life insurance is a very, very efficient savings vehicle that is comparable. Like if we're talking about rate of return, comparable to a high yield savings account. So if you like CDs, you like high yield savings accounts, you like treasury, like T-bills right now and bonds because of the higher interest rates, you'll absolutely love high cash value dividend paying whole life insurance. It actually makes saving money fun. Like I look forward to putting as much money as I can into my policy because it's getting that uninterrupted tax-free compound growth. I can access it at any time for both an emergency and an opportunity, right? That emergency and opportunity fund is going to continue to grow because I get that guaranteed growth, I get the dividends, all that stuff. I'm also protecting my family financially in case something happens to me, right? Because it's life insurance, we have the death benefit, right? So there's just so many more advantages of something like a cash value whole life insurance policy over traditional savings vehicles. But I would argue, though, that it's actually a good thing to put money in the bank first, build that up, because me personally, when it comes to designing policies, I like to do an upfront lump sum into the policies. It makes them very efficient. You get access to up to 90% usually of your cash value within the first 30 days. So at that point, you have a very, very efficient savings vehicle, but you got to get to that point first. So I like this baby step of just put money into the bank. Don't worry about inflation right now. Don't worry about investing it right now. Just stack the cash, get 6 months, and then we ask ourselves, okay, what do we do with this? Can I do better than a traditional savings vehicle? And the answer is absolutely. Ask me how I know, because I implement it in my life. And these policies are just freaking amazing, right? But yeah, it leads to having an emergency fund, but as you alluded to, Jeff, also the opportunities as well. So our money's going to continue to grow, even if we borrow against it to take advantage of an opportunity. Now we're really starting to snowball in the right direction when it comes to building wealth. So baby step 3, I love it, but don't stop there, right? Don't just stop at 6 months. Like when you hit it, like keep saving money and then look for more efficient ways to start to deploy those savings into both an emergency and opportunity fund. Cash value life insurance is a great option. So those are my thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I love it, man. I mean, the whole idea is efficiency, right? And, parking that money in an account that just may not be growing at a great interest rate for maybe a portion of your savings is great, but then having a larger percentage, especially as you get past 6 months into a year, 2 years, where's the best place to store that where you still have the liquidity for it? Whole life, cash value whole life is such a tremendous option because it's giving you all those other benefits. And I think it's David McKnight that talks about this, and maybe Tom Wall even talks about it in similar ways. He has kind of these one-liners of like, having like your savings or having like your college, investing for your kids for college, having those things also give you a pay raise in retirement, because what the vehicle is doing, it serves two different functions. It can serve as the savings vehicle, but then because you've got that asset in place already, it's permanent. What does that same asset do for you later in life in retirement? Like it can be a powerful volatility buffer where when the market goes down, you've got access to cash to where you're not pulling it from the market, double dipping a loss or locking in the losses in the account, letting it rebound, because you've got the secondary pile of cash that you can pull from, and that can greatly, extend the life of your stock market portfolio as you're pulling income from retirement. And that's just fantastic. But that means that I can utilize that function later in life, but the same vehicle gives me the functionality of having all the benefits you spoke to of a savings vehicle. Like that's ultimate efficiency. That's super efficiency. Yep. Instead of having to have all these individualized accounts doing all these individualized things, we can start having a much more holistic plan that has the synergy built in within it to really serve a purpose all the way through our life. That's phenomenal. I don't have to do all these different things. And we still talk diversification. We still want to have the different parts of our plan in place. We still want to be leveraging the market and the different aspects, but it just adds so much more efficiency, adds so much more safety to our plan as we look throughout someone's entire lifetime. So love all those points, man. Great stuff. So let's jump into kind of what we wanted to really jump into in much more detail today based on current events. Dave's step 4 is to start investing, 15% because you've got all your debts paid off, maybe minus your house. I think that's his caveat, is you can save the house for later because that's step 6.
I think that's 6, yeah.
Yep. But if you've got all that, you've got a bunch of emergency fund, and we would maybe suggest going beyond that into more of the opportunity fund. Then let's start putting money away for our future. Let's start growing the money. And of course, Dave, his particular vehicles are mutual funds that, he promotes through his show. And He talks about index funds, I believe, and there's a lot of different ways that you can invest in the market, right? There's a lot of different ways to do that. Now, the 15% number, I'm not sure exactly where he arrives at why 15%. There could be a lot of, you can reference the scriptures and they say to tithe 10% and save 10%. So that might be part of where he's coming up with that. But I think everybody, this is kind of a unique number for everybody that depends on where you're at. What are your goals? How much cash flow do you have? What type of, employment or business do you have? That number might be different for people. I mean, we hear of some of the more wealthy people that, maybe influencers on social media, that they're sometimes investing 30% of their income or even more than that, living on a very small percentage of what the cash flow their businesses generate and investing the rest because they have that wealthy mindset. It's the delayed gratification. It's thinking long term and thinking, how can I put my money to work today, not spending it, putting it to work so it can, be a multiple down the road in a decade that, 100,000 could turn into 10 million. I mean, that's the way a lot of the real estate investors look at it, is I can do without some of the toys for now, and then I can really go up some financial levels, after a decade or two because I've been investing more. So that 15%, I think that's a customized number. You got to be working with a financial person that you trust and come up with a plan in that number. But I think investing in general is great, but then it's kind of like we just talked about with saving and the emergency fund. Like, where are we saving? Well, I think we should be asking the same thing about investing. Where are we investing and why are we investing there? Are most of the people I talk to, Matt, they just do it because that's the only thing they ever have heard. Just throw your 401k. That's about it. They might have some diversification, if you want to call it that, into a mutual fund or an index fund or an ETF. But I mean, most people, they invest in the market, and because that's all they know. But there's other things you can invest in. You can invest in yourself. We've done a lot of content on that in the past, of the power of investing in yourself. And that can sometimes have a much greater return. I know for me, it certainly has. I haven't found a product that's done as much as what I've been able to do in my own life to scale my income, because I've learned skill sets, I've developed networks, I've increased my knowledge and experience, a lot of times through failure. But all those things can sometimes add up. So, investing doesn't always have to be just throwing money at the market, because that's what we're taught to do, and that's the main narrative out there. I love what Garrett talks about with his investor DNA, is figuring out, getting a deeper look into yourself and what makes you tick and how you think and what your beliefs are and what your values are around money. And am I investing in a way that is in alignment with those things? Am I investing in a way that fuels me? Am I investing in a way that is in alignment with my purpose and my passion and the way I want to serve other people? Because if you're investing with counter intentions or, confusion, because sometimes people don't even understand how the markets function. They're just doing it blindly because that's what somebody told them to do. And that can lead to some disconnect, and that can show up in other areas of your life if you're just living a life out of balance. And so those are some things that I like to think about. And, even the whole idea of, like, have you even asked how much money am I investing? How much of it do I want to be in the market? Do I want some safer investments? Do I want to, be 50-50? I was on a call last night with a 50-year-old husband and wife, and I was asking them that question. And when I asked them, they just kind of went blank. Like, I don't know. I've never even thought about that. Never even occurred to them, like, how much is the amount that I have tied to the market, the amount that I'm in alignment with? They didn't even know the answer to that. And so we worked through that, and we're going to have to talk more about it next week when I have our second appointment, because they've just never thought about that, to know, like, how much do I want safe, and what are some safe investments? I don't even know. What are safe ways to grow my money? They were completely clueless in that. So those are the questions that, you need to begin being educated about, so that you know what and why you're doing what you're doing, not just following a guru, not just following what everybody does at the office, but you're doing things with intention and with purpose that are in alignment with what you're here to do. I think that is such a critical part. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the investment. I know you had a great post today on Facebook that I liked a lot, and share some thoughts around what your perspective is here with current events.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so again, I like the order of the baby step, but this is where I really start to push back against Dave Ramsey. Again, like the stuff that he teaches with regards to building long-term wealth, it's all about just playing it safe, relying on Wall Street and the stock market to build all this wealth for you. When you're 65, maybe 70 years old, you'll finally be able to live the life that you want. when he says that these mutual funds are going to do 12% every year, so you can actually withdraw 8% every year once you're in retirement. I mean, just horrible, absolutely horrible advice. I don't even know how he gets away with it sometimes. It's crazy, some of the stuff that he throws out there. Now, here's the thing. There's nothing necessarily wrong with investing in the stock market, okay? I am personally not a fan of the market. I have $0 invested in the stock market because it doesn't match what you mentioned earlier, Jeff, my investor DNA. I want nothing to do with the stock market. I have other investments that I do, but that's because it's more in alignment with my goals, my risk tolerance, and things like that. Things that I have more control of. I'll give you an example. I really, really like private money lending right now on real estate. I'm able to leverage my life insurance policies. I borrow against them at 6 or 7%. I then lend them out at 13, 14% plus points, right? I'm making positive arbitrage just like a bank does when they pay us 1% for our savings account. They lend it out at 4 or whatever. Right? So I'm doing that over and over and over and over and over again. And that's something that I have a lot of control over. It's very low risk when you know what you're doing because the investment is secured by a hard asset, which is the property that's being worked on. And it's completely passive, right? So I'm putting my money to work in multiple different places at once, and it's all passive, right? So that works for me. Not going to work for everybody. And my long-term investing is Bitcoin. I have a little bit of other cryptocurrencies as well, but Bitcoin to me just makes so much more sense than the stock market. Now, when people hear that, they might think I'm crazy. And even after doing their research, maybe people don't want anything to do with Bitcoin. They want to do traditional stock market investment. That is totally fine. All right. But the point is to have a plan, understand what your goals are, where you're at financially, what are you trying to accomplish, and then finding the best vehicles to reach those goals in the most efficient and time efficient way possible, right? In the least amount of time possible, not waiting until you're 65, 70 years old, hoping that the stock market's going to do what your financial advisor told you it's going to do. Unfortunately, this 401k experiment is not working out for a lot of people. And I've interviewed the founder of the 401k, Ted Benna, on my channel, and even he's not a fan of the 401k anymore, to the point where he's actually created a new plan. It's the 401a plan. He calls it Radish, right? So he's like restarting the process all over again because of this monstrosity that the 401k has turned into. And people are reaching retirement age with a couple $100,000 in their 401k. It's like, how are you going to survive on that? And unfortunately, by the time you realize there's a problem, it's too late. Yeah, at 65, 70 years old, you realize you don't have enough money for retirement. The market didn't do what you thought it was going to do. Or how about this? It did, but you didn't pay attention to all the fees and everything that's being taken out of your portfolio every single year, regardless of whether the market goes up or down. Not to mention now you have massive tax bill as well. That tax bill comes due at 72 and a half now or whatever, right? So all these things start to hit you all at once. And if you didn't have a plan in place and you're just following what mainstream media tells you to do and what your financial advisor tells you to do, and that's just what everybody does. They max out, or most people don't even max out their 401k. It's like, well, you're not really setting yourself up for success. You're more burying your head in the sand and crossing your fingers. And it's a hope and a prayer on your financial future. And I don't like that at all. I think people would be far better served if they were to just educate themselves a little bit more about building wealth. You don't have to become this financial expert or anything. But guys, we got one shot on this planet. Money is a very important part of living the life that we want to live. We should probably study it a little bit and figure out the best ways to reach our goals. Is it just investing in the stock market? Maybe that's part of it, right? Like I said, nothing necessarily wrong with it, but just dumping your money in mutual funds and your 401k and thinking that's going to do it. Oh man, I got a bridge to sell you over in Brooklyn, all right? Because it's just not working out for a lot of people. And here's the other problem, Jeff, is that we're taught to put the cart before the horse here, where people are investing when they shouldn't be. Like, it's a good step in the right direction. If you start investing, I don't know, $200-300 a month into a 401k, that could feel really good. But here's the question: is that $200 or $300 a month really going to move the needle? You're moving somewhat in the right direction, but that's oftentimes not enough to make a big enough difference when you actually hit retirement. It's the number one reason why people don't have enough money in their 401k when they reach retirement age. It's not that the market didn't perform. It's that they weren't able to contribute enough to really make a difference and really take advantage of the returns that the market's done over the last 10, 20 years. So we're putting the cart before the horse by investing first when we don't even have enough income to really make a difference in the first place. So this is what I talk about a lot in my Millennial Wealth Creator Blueprint is focus on the income first. And always, you should always be increasing income and cash flow. All right. We build our vault, but our income is continuing to increase always. That way, instead of investing $200-300 a month into your 401k, how about you invest that back into yourself first, learn how to double your income so then you can put $2,000 a month into your 401k. Now we're talking. Now we're making some real progress here when it comes to investing. But if you don't have if you're not contributing enough to these investments, I mean, obviously it's better than nothing. But just to assume that a mutual fund is going to do 12% on average every single year, like Dave Ramsey says, oh man, you're really rolling the dice, right? You got to be really careful. And what I would wrap up with is on this baby step is the post that I did earlier, because there's a lot of turmoil, a lot of volatility in the market right now. And I'm seeing all these influencers and people are just like freaking out. They're calling for like it's the next Great Depression and all this stuff. And it's just like it's just so blown out of proportion. It's just insane. And it's because fear and panic sells, right? That's how they control people. It's how they get people to, invest in these ridiculous things that serve Wall Street way more than it serves us. But I thought to myself, it was just kind of bizarre because if we're so confident in the stock market to build wealth for us, why on earth would we not be excited as hell when the stock market goes down? Because now we can buy it for cheap. We can buy it cheaper now than it's like the S&P is down like 10 or 12% off its highs at the time of this reporting. I think the Russell 2000 is down like 21%. NASDAQ maybe 50. Like stuff is on sale. So like if you did things in the right order, you worked on your income, you got your opportunity fund in place, we could start to deploy some of that opportunity money into like extra money into the market now because stuff is on sale. This is good, right? Anytime an asset that you truly believe is going to appreciate in value over the long run, when that thing goes on sale, you want to load up. I do this. I don't invest in the market. I invest in Bitcoin. That's my thing. It's a whole other video, but I love when Bitcoin crashes. I love it. I'm just waiting on the sideline constantly. Anytime it's down 5-10%, whoop, I scoop up more. Whoop, scoop up more. Right? But it's because I've done my research. I have a long-term plan. I'm not worried about volatility, right? Because it's not such a large portion of my portfolio. I don't have so much exposure to it that it has a significant negative impact on my lifestyle. I'm focused on increasing income, continuing to build my vault, I'm doing my private money lending. Whatever Bitcoin does, I don't give a crap because I'm worried about that 20, 30 years down the road. So I'm just going to stack it every single time it comes down. But it made me think today when I was just seeing all this really that this content is just blown out of proportion. It's like there's obviously in my opinion, a massive opportunity for people to reevaluate what they're doing with their money. Because if you're freaking out about the market right now, you've either got too much exposure, you have a plan but don't believe in it, all right, or you just don't have a plan at all, and you see everybody else freaking out, so you have to freak out. It's like you need to do your own research, come up with your own plan based on your investor DNA. Make sure you have your income in place, you've stacked your vault, your savings, everything like that, and you're just in the long run. You're letting the market do its thing over the long run, right? And get it. You should get excited when it gets on sale because you're getting it cheaper now. And if you're not doing that, something's wrong. So there's something underlying or beneath that needs to be worked on. And the other point that I made in the post is like another, I guess, segment of the population that might be freaking out is like if you're in retirement and this is happening, this is a really big problem, right? If you're in the accumulation phase of your financial journey right now, not really an issue. We should get excited. But if you're in retirement and you're going through this right now, this poses the biggest risk to your retirement. This kind of stuff, if you have not made the right moves. You mentioned earlier, Jeff, about the volatility buffer. This is where a volatility buffer is a retirement lifesaver because the market is down 10, 15% in the first few months of the year. If you're taking withdrawals, distributions from your portfolio during that, you are like cutting your retirement in half, the longevity of your retirement of that portfolio in half, because you are compounding that loss and making it worse. right? So, but then I posed the question too, is like, if you're relying on the stock market for income, why are you doing that? Because the stock market is an accumulation vehicle, not a distribution vehicle. It's not a great income vehicle, right? And I mentioned this in the post. You know what it is? And we've had many conversations about this. Annuities. It's like the best income vehicle on planet Earth. If you accumulated wealth in the market, reached retirement, you transferred a portion of that to create the income that you need from the annuity, you don't give a crap what's happening in the market right now because you're guaranteed that income for life. So I'll put a pretty bow on this with regards to step 4. Okay. Everything I just said is why it's so important to start doing your own research. Stop following gurus off the cliff. Okay. Like listening to every single little thing they say. You need to start listening to multiple different sources, doing your own research, learning how these different vehicles work and how they fit into your own plan, and taking a more holistic approach to your financial plan so that you could put the right pieces in place so that when there is a stock market crash like there is right now, you don't give a crap. It doesn't impact you at all, other than to maybe provide you additional opportunity, right? That's the camp, at least in my opinion, that you should be in, because we don't need to stress about this stuff. It's not bad that the market's coming down unless you're not prepared for it, unless you're overexposed and you haven't moved into the right things, right? So baby step number 4, all right, you can get started with investing, but don't blindly follow what mainstream financial media and gurus and influencers tell you. Do your own research and find what's going to work best for your specific goals and plans. I'll wrap up with that.
Yeah, phenomenal stuff, man. I mean, I think, one of the big things that I've done recently with a few different clients, as you're talking about retirement, is a lot of people, they've been so indoctrinated with just shovel all the money into your investments, and you're supposed to get this $1 million target. It's kind of like this thing that, Dave Ramsey talks about, millionaires all the time. He's got these studies that, millionaire this, millionaire that, get to be this millionaire. But like a lot of people don't have like a tangible understanding or reality of like, what is that doing for me? And is it going to really get me where I want to go? I mean, the last couple client calls I've had this week, anybody that's talking retirement, especially the people last night that I've already referenced, a couple, I said, how much money do you already have set aside? How much money do you need in retirement? They have no idea. They kind of know generally how much they've got put away. They've got they've done very well, but they have no concept of, I've got this huge pile of money, but how does it convert into income, and how is it going to actually like show up in my life once I'm retired? They have no idea about that. And that's one of the huge gaps that we see. I mean, we talked about in another video. David McKnight wrote The Guru Gap back in December and published it, talking about some of these things where there's kind of these gaps and almost these huge craters in understanding that people are listening to some of this advice, but then there's things missing that people have no concept of what to do. And that's where we have to come in and fill those gaps through education, working one-on-one with clients, because a lot of people think, well, if I've got enough money, then I should be good in retirement, but they don't know how to do the math backwards to say, well, how much do you want in retirement? If you want 100,000 per year in retirement, because that's what you've been used to, or you want to, increase your living and lifestyle, enjoy the jet skis and enjoy some travel, how much do you need? Well, that's $4 million right there. Do you need? Yeah. Well, if I'm doing the math right, maybe not even quite that much, but you need 4%.
It's a lot
to get back to that. So you need, I guess it'd be 2.5 million you need. So, I mean, that's a lot that you would need. And a lot of people don't know how to calculate that. So some people, they're way off, and some people you have to have kind of a really tough conversation with, like, hey, you don't have enough set aside. Like what you've put aside isn't going to produce enough income for you, at least predictably. And then other people, they're actually in a better spot than they think. And then for those people, it could be a challenge of getting them to actually spend money, because they spent 30 or 40 years scrimping and saving and sacrificing and delaying, and they're never living. And you spoke to this when you first started talking about the investment, is looking at your lifestyle, and are you wanting to wait to the end? And it made me think of, Garrett talks about buying your net worth and investing in your cash flow. And you're talking about, work on your income first. That can be the very first thing that you need to really up, so that when you are putting money towards an investment like Dave talks about, it's getting you somewhere noticeably, and you're not relying on the returns to get you there. Solely. It's partly because of the contributions you're making, plus the rates of return. Because if the rates of return aren't always there, or the timing isn't quite right, you want to still have enough that you've been able to put away to make up for that. And so those are just a couple thoughts that, off the
100%.
top of my head. It also made me think of, we were on a training earlier with Tyler from Life 180, and he was talking about a client that he recently had that retired at age 70. They decided to work longer, and they died of, I think, a heart attack at age 72. They had 2 years of retirement, and it's like, I
Yeah.
know for me and a lot of people listening to this would probably say, you know what, I'm okay with cutting back in some areas, but I want to enjoy my life. And if that means spending a little bit more money now to enjoy it, because there's no guarantee that I'll be here well into the future. There's absolutely no guarantees. And, I've spoke of this in other videos. My dad passed a little over a year ago, and, there's a lot of things I wish I would have done differently in the past, but I can only move forward with those new insights of like, you know what, I'm going to live more today instead of thinking and having that future thinking of I'm going to do this when, or I'm going to, be able to spend more time with my family when I'm at this certain point. You do that now, you fit it into your here and now and make sure that you're living life to the fullest now. But there's got to obviously be a balance of preparing for the future and living in the here and now. And I think that balance is different for everybody. And that's part of what we help clients with when we're doing calls, is getting to know the person and where are they in some of those things so that they're doing what they feel is best for them to get them the results that they want. And
Yeah.
because you're just not guaranteed, anything in the future. And I think what we've talked about so far of Dave's steps, there's a lot of synergy that can happen between these steps, because when you've saved up enough money, and I know Garrett talks about this in some of his books, I think 5-Day Weekend is one of them. He really goes into it in depth. Is once you've got your kind of your habit of saving down, where every single month there's an excess and you're able to put more and more money away, and you spoke to it a little bit of not just immediately putting it right in the market, but building up some cash reserves for a period of time, and then being able to make more like lump sums, maybe quarterly or semi-annual, something like that, into various places. We're waiting for those opportunities in the market, because I've done a little bit of retail trading. I've got a lot of people in my sphere that are very successful at retail trading, and there's certain trends that the market has. And now most people, if they're trying to trend and time the market, that's a recipe for disaster. But if you can spend some time learning that, then when you know that Bitcoin went down a little bit and you know that it's a pullback to go higher, you can get in at the pullback and ride it up for a little while. And so if you can, again, increase your education, increase your knowledge, you can be in a better position by having the emergency and opportunity fund to execute, even if you're still playing the stock market, to get in at a better time, waiting for those opportunities, waiting for the bad headlines like we saw today, and then going, this is a key time that I can maybe put my position in to be further ahead in the next, how many ever months or years, wherever your time frame is you're playing. Those are the types of things that doing these things that Dave teaches, and they're similar to what we teach, obviously, as well, of getting that foundation straight, having the capital to deploy, and then being at the right place at the right time when an opportunity strikes for you can pull the trigger. When you can pull the trigger, then you can capitalize usually on those things. So I think those are my thoughts on that. You got a couple more?
Yeah, a couple things on that. I think this is really important, because this is where a lot of people get stuck. And I'll start with one of the ways that it was explained to me with regards to reaching retirement, and what the clients you're talking to right now. I mean, they're a perfect example of this, where we're taught how to play offense our entire lives, and then we're just expected to switch over to defense immediately, right? So the analogy I use is football. You take football, for example, right? You take the offensive line. I mean, you're talking about some of the most physically talented people in sports. Okay, if you take the offensive line, and then all of a sudden they might do great on offense, but if you switch them over to the defensive line, it's going to be a disaster, right? Because it's a completely different game. Well, accumulation versus distribution in personal finance is the exact same thing. There are far different strategies for wealth accumulation than there is for income distribution. There are far better vehicles for financial vehicles for accumulating wealth versus distributing that wealth. But if you've never learned that, well, you're going to be in that position where you're scrimping and saving until you're 65, 70 years old. And then you're going to be like, well, what the heck do I do now? Right. So we need to start planning for this stuff ahead of time. And that comes down to educating yourself. And one other point that I wanted to address, because I think this is really important. It's really sad to hear stories like you said, where that Tyler shared, where the gentleman retired at 70, he passed away at 72. It's just that's really, really sad. And I would obviously hope that he had some good life experiences along the way. But here's the thing: is where we're taught like this accumulation theory, where we're taught to accumulate as much as we possibly can, scrimp and save, sacrifice. And then sometimes you do need to do that. Like you said, there needs to be a balance, right? We don't need to be blowing all of our money just because it could potentially end tomorrow, right? We need to be responsible. However, once you understand how these different vehicles work and you start to become more efficient with where you put your money and what you do with it, all of a sudden we're able to have our cake and eat it too, right? So a perfect example of this, I had a conversation with a lady a few months ago about potentially setting up a policy, and she said one of the things that that her and her family is struggling with is that they like to go on family trips, right? So she said that we're probably behind on our savings, but it's because we like to live, we like to create these family experiences and stuff like that. And I'm not going to argue against that, right? That's great, right? That's why we make money to make these memories and have these experiences. But you also need to save. So I asked her, well, what if you could do both? Did you know you could do that? She's like, what are you talking about? And that's where I started educating her about how dividend paying whole life insurance works, which Dave Ramsey hates. A lot of these, mainstream financial gurus just hate whole life insurance because they don't understand it, just like everybody, like so many other people. But when you understand it, you realize, holy smokes, I can do both. Like if I take the money that I was going to use for my family trip and I put that into my whole life insurance policy first, okay, now I have a foundational asset that's going to grow for the rest of my life. It's forcing me to save. It's kind of like a very efficient forced savings vehicle. But the thing is if I want to use that policy to go on a family vacation, I can do that without interrupting the growth of that money. So I'm saving for my retirement, I'm building wealth while I'm also creating the family experience or having the family experience, going on that family trip. I don't have to sacrifice that in order to build wealth for the long term. I can do both because I understand how this particular vehicle works. Now, I'm not a huge fan of using policy loans for stuff like that. However, if you're going to do it, goes back to what I asked earlier, why not do it in the most efficient way possible, right? So you can have these experiences if you start to make more strategic moves with your money, putting it in the right places. We don't have to sacrifice nearly as much. We can live along the way. We don't have to wait till 65, 70 years old to start living our life. And we certainly don't have to wait till 65, 70 years old to have $1 million. Like that's like the magical number that everybody wants to get to in their 401k. Screw that noise, man. Why not learn how to make $1 million now so you can enjoy it now and not have to wait till 65, 70 years old. Now, and you don't have to make $1 million. I'm not saying that. I'm saying stop relying on these financial vehicles to build wealth for you. Recognize that you are your greatest asset. Educate yourself. Become more efficient where you're putting your money. Make sure that you're increasing income and cash flow. You don't have to be making $1 million a year, but let's reach that goal a lot sooner and not hope and pray that the market is going to do it for us. The market should be part of the portfolio potentially, right? But that's not where we should be relying. Like we shouldn't be solely relying on the market or really any financial vehicle to do it for us, right? We build wealth. We deploy the capital and income that we create into these different vehicles. We are responsible for the end result. So if we can find more efficient ways to reach our goals, why on earth would we not do that, right? So that would be my final thoughts on step 4.
Yeah, good stuff, man. So yeah, let's move on to step 5 here. So step 5 in Dave's plan is saving for college. So we've done the investing, we've been working on that. And so I think it's, kind of similar. We're still talking about putting money away for some future event and some future need that we have. So, college is a little bit different. Now, if you don't have kids, then obviously you can skip over this step and contribute that money into your own future. But if you do have kids and I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old at home, and those are things that are going to be coming into the, reality here in the next few years as to what are they going to do in their adult life? What are they going to do for a career path? Are they going to be an entrepreneur like their dad? Are they going to do, kind of the normal thing? They're going to go to college. What are they going to get into? What are they going to need? Are they going to be getting into a trade? I was talking to a friend yesterday that he's got a son that's in his 30s, early 30s, I think, and he's going to get into the electrical trade and become an electrician now that he's kind of got his bearings and stuff like that. And what do we do to help our children get to that point? 'Cause especially for college, it can be a very big financial burden on families to try to get them into a college, because college expenses continue to go up every single year. I saw some graphs recently talking back to when the Department of Education was created nationally, and that the cost of tuition has just gone up dramatically ever since I think it was in the 1980s. And part of that's due to inflation, obviously. Part of that is due to the popularity of college and, a lot of factors that we won't get into right now, obviously. But at the end of the day, how do we prepare for this? And so the traditional advice is a 529 plan. And much like we've been doing with several of these baby steps, it's asking the deeper question. Is this the best place? Are there anything else out there that will do this? And looking at the whole college process, there's a great interview that Matt Love did, I think last fall, with a gentleman. He's actually here in Michigan where I'm at, and he does strategic college planning. And there was a lot of great nuggets that he talked about in there. One of them is the special use of what we've been talking about, and we talk about all the time, is specially designed cash value life insurance as part of, or for some, it's even the best strategy to do completely all as the this is the college savings plan. Because one of the things that we see with college planning is when the child is ready to get into college and they're maybe like in their junior year of high school and starting to prep for all that stuff, and they're doing their FAFSAs and they're filling out all the things that need to be done and looking at how much financial aid does this family qualify for. The government has their criteria of what they're going to look at, and it's your assets and it's your income and those types of things. So if you have a portion of your income that is in a cash value life insurance policy, that's essentially off the radar screen of the criteria that they're going to look for. So you can actually still be making the same amount of money, but have your assets positioned in a certain way where you're going to be able to provide more financial aid ability for your child by doing that. And that's one strategy of using a whole life policy for college planning. The other one is what happens if your child doesn't go to college, or like we've already talked about in investing. What happens with investing, we talk about usually with retirement, but the same principle holds true with investing when we're talking about college. What happens if the market bottoms out a year or two, or the year that your child needs to go to college, and you thought you had 100 grand, but now you got 75, and it doesn't meet all the tuition needs? What are you going to do then? So having that backup plan, kind of that volatility buffer, if you will, even for college planning, much like we would think about it for retirement planning, thinking about having the ability to have more flexible capital, more flexible cash, that if my child doesn't want to become a nurse or doesn't want to become a lawyer, where definitely has to go into college, they want to go a different route, I've got capital that there's not going to be extra penalties because they didn't go into the college system. Because that's what 529s have, is much like a retirement plan. If you're using the money prematurely, you're not in retirement, you wanted to get access to it, you get a 10% penalty. 529s are very similar in that fact. If you're not using the money for what it was designed to do, they penalize you for it. Now that loses control, it loses flexibility, it loses value of that money. If you're wanting to, pivot and go a different direction with the money that you've been allocating for college, and just put you in a less efficient position. So doing some of these strategic moves around the college planning, I've never heard Dave talk about this. You have to usually go to alternative sources who are thinking more holistically, more outside the box, looking at a lot more moving pieces, and how do other things than just rate of return solve a problem more efficiently and arrive at a better solution, which is usually, either having their children already, having a majority of their college paid for, or getting more funding from, funding sources for college that allows them, doesn't put as much burden on the family. There's a lot of aspects to this that, are great things to be considering as you're planning this. And I think I've already reached out to the gentleman. I need to check my messages on LinkedIn actually after the last couple of days, because I want to get this gentleman on my channel here and interview him, because he's phenomenal talking about the whole college prep thing from, early high school all the way through. How do you set things up so your child has the best opportunity to get into the workforce and into their career, no matter which way it is, but do it with the most efficiency possible? So love to hear any thoughts you've got on the college side.
Yeah, all great points, man. And all reasons why I don't like 529 plans. They don't really make sense to me. Once you explore these alternative ways of preparing for college. And, again, the things that Dave teaches, it really teaches you to play it safe. I mean, could a 529 plan work out for you, for college planning? Yeah, maybe, but it's a gamble. And one of the reasons it's a gamble is because typically with a 529 plan, it's usually invested in the market, right? At least a large portion of it anyways, right? The problem with that is that you're not giving, you're not, you don't have enough runway. You don't have enough time to really take advantage of the long-term average rate of return that the market does over, let's say, 30, 40, 50 years, because you have a much smaller time window here. We're talking about, it depends on when you start the plan, but if it's 10 years, even 15 years, it's really not enough time. I mean, you have to get lucky essentially that you're going to hit another major bull market like we've had over the last 10 years. If you had a 529 plan over the recent bull market, you probably did fine, but how do you know that's going to happen again? Like, do you know what the stock market's going to do over the next 10 years? I don't think anybody does. So for me, it's just it's much more of a gamble than people think. Not to mention, well, like you mentioned earlier, Jeff, there's a significant lack of control. There's a lot of limitations, and it just doesn't really make sense to me. The other thing too, though, is that, and this is why I think, in my opinion, just based on the research I've done, that dividend paying cash value whole life insurance is one of, if not the best way to save for college for a number of different reasons. But there's one in particular that I want to hit on, because actually I overheard a conversation the other day. A gentleman was talking about how him and his wife were sacrificing their financial future right now for their kids' financial future, their education, which is a noble thing to do. And I think we need to, obviously do that for our kids. The problem is, you're not aware that you don't have to sacrifice your financial future just so your child can have an education. You can do both once you understand how these things work, right? So you could with a dividend paying whole life insurance policy, you could use that for your child's education. Actually, before I get to that part, we've already discussed how that helps with your retirement, because that's going to get uninterrupted tax-free compound growth for the life of the policy. It's a forced savings vehicle. You have the death benefit. It's solving multiple problems. We have long-term care protection with it as well, right? Acts as a great volatility buffer in retirement for when the market goes down like it currently is. You can create supplemental tax-free retirement income from it as well, taking the dividends in cash, right? It's a lot of, it gives you permission to spend as well, because you know that the assets you spend in retirement, right, are going to be replenished by the death benefit once you pass away, okay? So a lot of benefits to where you're preparing for your retirement. When you use whole life insurance for college planning, you don't have to sacrifice any of that, because you can use the whole life policy to pay for your child's or help pay for your child's education by taking policy loans against it once they're ready, once they hit when it's time for them to go to college. You can take policy loans against it, help cover tuition or whatever expenses. And I'm a big advocate of this, actually having your child, like setting up some type of loan repayment structure. This teaches fiscal responsibility to your kids, right? Where they're going to slowly pay that policy loan back over time. Okay. Just like they would a regular student loan, right? But throughout that time period, let's say it takes them 10, 20 years, whatever, to pay off the policy loan. Well, guess what? Your money was continuing to grow in the policy the entire time. And every time they make a repayment on that policy loan, that's restoring cash value in your policy. So 20 years goes by, let's say you're reaching retirement age, you've helped put your child through college, and you still have this asset for retirement that could be completely paid off, because you could pay off a whole life policy. You don't have to pay into it your entire life. So you've now helped secure your financial future, while at the same time helping your child's with your child's education. And I just, like, when I grasped that concept, I was like, why on earth would anybody do anything else? Like, it doesn't really make any sense. I mean, I suppose, again, everybody's situation is different. Could a 529 plan be a part of it? Sure. But I don't think it should be the only thing. And if you can prepare for your retirement and save for your child's education at the same time, why on earth would we not do that? And also what this does is it reduces the amount of money we have to make in order to achieve all of our goals, because we're solving multiple problems with one financial vehicle, right? It's preparing for college education and it's preparing for retirement. The same dollars. I don't have to put money into a 529 plan and a 401k at the same time. Now I'm I'm going in two different directions here, right? My $500, let's say, now it's 250 here, 250 here, instead of $500 concentrated in one place, which is going to be way more powerful, right? That's the power of efficiency. So I think for me, college planning, huge benefit using cash value life insurance. Like you said, it doesn't interfere with FAFSA, student loans. Sometimes I think 529 plans can interfere with scholarships as well. I've heard stories of that. Can't confirm that 100%, but I've heard stories of that. So, and then you mentioned, like, what if your child doesn't want to go to college? What are you going to do with it then, right? You're going to take a hit. Maybe I think you can use it for your own education if you wanted. But if you're saving in a whole life insurance policy, if they don't go to college, well, you just continue funding the policy and use it for your retirement. So it just it makes sense to me. But yeah, that baby step, again, it's just teaching people how to play it safe. Maybe that's good for some, but it's certainly not the most efficient way to do it.
Yep. Yeah, definitely not thinking outside the box on some of that and really looking at the other pieces, because you did mention it, there are scenarios where people earn too much money and they don't qualify for much financial aid. And that can hinder the whole process. I mean, I think the Matt Love interview with that gentleman, he spoke to that a few times of, it can be a problem that people aren't prepared for. They think, well, I need to make more money to do all these other things. But then when it comes to college planning, making more money actually hinders the process, and it hinders the ability of your child to get into the college maybe that they want to, or, just set them up for a different path, and maybe more on the child, more financial stress, and really getting them into the debt cycle, much more prematurely if they're not able to qualify for those scholarships and the things like you mentioned. So yeah, it's something to really take a closer look at, because it's a very, very important piece that gets overlooked. We don't think there's any other options, much like with retirement. Well, everybody does a 401k. Well, when it comes to college, everybody does a 529, and we just don't think outside that. So these are definitely some good things to consider. As we move along, baby step number 6 is pay off the house. And, it's funny because I've grown up with, kind of the Dave Ramsey mindset from my parents, and, getting your debt paid off. And then as I've learned more about personal finance and business finance and all the things we've learned around infinite banking and financial strategies, really looking at, does on paper the math make sense to pay off our home? And like we've been saying with almost all of these, really looking at this from a different perspective. And paying off the house, sometimes there's a definite emotional benefit to that, and just this mental benefit to knowing that where my house is, where my family resides, especially if you think you're going to be there for the next 20, 30 years. I've got a good friend of mine. We were, great friends in high school, and, they built a house once they graduated college, and he's like, this is where we're living, like, we ain't moving. This is where we're going to be for life. And, to be able to have where you plant your roots be paid off and you don't have to worry about anything, there's definite value to that. And, those are the kind of situations, if somebody's really stuck on that, I would invite you to examine like the emotional ties around why you feel like you need to have the house paid off. Because if you look at the math to it, a lot of times the math doesn't validate the same need. A lot of times the math says, especially if you've got an interest rate that's, fairly good. I know a lot of people that I've talked to, they got locked into a mortgage in the last 5 years or so, and they're paying 2%, 3%, 4% on their mortgage. It's like, that's cheap money for a mortgage. That's something we want to hang on to if you don't have to. And it makes so much more sense, like we talked about earlier in the debt discussion, to allocate other funds to other things. Because if you can be earning much more than 4% in your investments, why would you allocate additional resources to paying off your house if you can be earning the 12% per year in your mutual fund like Dave teaches? You're losing 8%. And what does that do compounding over 30 years? So the math a lot of times doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be allocating extra resources to paying off the house. Now, if you don't have anything else going on in your life, you have no goals and dreams, and you've got a lot going already doing investments, and you just got a bunch of cash sitting around, like, maybe it does make sense to do that. Or your wife or your husband really just needs to have this monkey off their back. And I know an interview I watched a month or so ago that on Caleb's channel, he was interviewing, gosh, I'm blanking on his name right now, but they had this discussion, and he was talking about that he just feels like when he has his house paid off, which he's working diligently at, and he's a financial guy like we are, he's like, I just know that I can do everything else in my business better. Like, I just feel that. And it's like, there's merit to that. So him and Caleb were kind of, getting on each other a little bit. It was kind of a good debate about like the math versus like the mental emotional side of it. And I think it's, again, an individualized discussion that everybody needs to have for themselves to come up with the right reasons why they're doing that. But a lot of people just blindly pay off their house because that's what Dave says to do, without really doing that extra digging and like, why am I doing this? And is there, just like this fear of loss or something going on that's generating these emotions? When financially, it makes actually more sense for me to allocate resources to my growth and, continuing to leverage the money that the bank is letting me have for the next 30 years and letting inflation kind of, I've heard it called short the dollar, and
Yep.
let it kind of be what it'll be. And knowing that my $1,000 mortgage today is going to spend a lot less $1,000 in 10, 15, 20 years is going to feel like a lot less than $1,000 because of inflation. So there's a lot of things to consider there. So I think those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts around the debt payoff of the house?
Yeah, great points. So, like you said, everybody's individual situation is different. Not everything in life is about math, right? I would say, like, if you have the first 5 things that we've talked about in order and you're actually being efficient with your money, you have a good foundation in place, you've got investments in place, you want to make extra payments to your house, I don't really see an issue with that. But again, is there a more efficient way to do it? Like, if you really want to be as efficient as possible, it's a great question to ask. Is paying off my house really that great of a decision? And I've actually run the numbers on Dave's scenario, Jeff, where he talks about getting 12% in mutual funds every single year, but then he wants you to pay your house off when you have a 3-4% mortgage rate, interest rates. Like, well, that doesn't make any sense, because that extra $500 or $1,000 a year that you put towards it, you put that into a mutual fund earning 12% every single year. I mean, we're talking like compounded over 20, 30 years, that we're talking about significant money. Actually, not even, it was like 17 years, or like 17 to 20 years, that, like, if you made the extra payments, that's what it would cut the mortgage down to. I mean, like, mathematically, it makes 0 sense. If that scenario is true, where you're making 12% every single year with mutual funds, it makes mathematically, it makes 0 sense to pay off your house. Okay. But not everything in life is about math. Like the example you gave is great, Jeff, where that gentleman was talking about, when he has his house paid off, he's just going to be able to show up in his business so much better. He's going to be more productive. He doesn't have this potential burden, this burden over his head. Like, what if something happens and we lose the house, whatever. I totally get that. All right. But if there's a more efficient way of doing it than just making extra payments, I mean, we've talked about this. We don't really need to go into detail on it now. We have other videos on this, but using something like the velocity banking concept, right, where we're using the HELOC to accelerate the mortgage pay down, right, where you can have your mortgage paid off in 5 to 7 years, maybe less than that, depending on your income. And all you're doing is using the HELOC as your checking account, funneling your income there, paying bills through it, whatever. Right. So that's a much more efficient way of doing it versus what Dave Ramsey typically recommends, is either making the extra payment like once a year or whenever you can, or getting the 15-year mortgage. All right. Again, these types of things are just playing it safe. And for some people that might make sense. But if you are somebody that really wants the best out of life and wants to be as efficient as possible with your money, well, that's where the education comes in on these different strategies and different ways to use these assets and vehicles, like a HELOC, for example, to accelerate the mortgage payoff. So I like the idea of paying off the house. Not everything is about math and efficiency, right? And I would put paying off the house in that category. But if it were me, I would still want to do it in the most efficient way possible. And I would want to make sure that I have everything else in order, those first 5 steps, like really, really good, before I even considered paying off the house. Because like you said, like when you take debt out, when you take on debt like that, you're shorting the dollar. I mean, your $1,000 a month, it's going to spend like $500 a month. It's going to feel like that later on down the road. So that can be a benefit sometimes. So yeah, everybody's situation is different, but just make sure you're doing it in the most efficient way possible.
Yep, totally agree. So I looked it up as Daniel Ronberg was the interview I was talking about that Caleb did, where they were debating that. I thought his name was Danny, but I couldn't say for sure. So yeah, all great points. I mean, I think, for me, when I've looked at this kind of dynamic with myself and with anything that comes financially, but particularly like the house, to me, it comes down to like my ability to create the life I want. Like, if I feel like I'm in command and control of my income increasing, I'm doing positive things in my businesses, I'm growing, I've got new opportunities, I'm learning new skill sets, and I feel like I'm expanding, to me, it's kind of a moot point whether I have my house paid off or I don't, because I'm in a place where I'm feeling empowered. I'm feeling in command and control of my money. Then it doesn't really matter to me, whether
Right.
I've got it paid off or not. Is it an extra bonus if I did? Great. That's fantastic. But to me, it's not something that keeps me awake at night thinking like, oh my gosh, I've got this big mortgage and I'm in debt for 30 years. I don't see it that way, but I think again, everybody sees it differently. And I think if you have more control over your finances, where you've got the efficiencies built in and you're doing things that give you, access to capital and doing a lot of the things that we talked about in this video and other videos with the cash value life insurance and good strategic planning, that usually does increase your control over your money, which can lead to more of the positive emotions that you're looking to feel around money. And then that may lessen the fear around having a mortgage for the next 15 or 30 years. And it might become a more of a moot point. So let's jump to the
Yep.
last point. Dave talks about building wealth and giving. So, I guess if you're investing well and you got your house paid off, then I guess your wealth is just going to accumulate like crazy, and you're going to be that multi-millionaire that Dave talks about, and you're going to be arriving at the golden gates with all this money. Then I guess you've arrived at the ultimate goal, I guess. And it always strikes me with Dave, because he comes from a Christian background. It always strikes me that giving is the very last thing here that he lists, when in my mind it probably would be first. I know a lot of success books talk about, if you want to receive more, give more. And I think in Zig Ziglar's See You at the Top, it's kind of that same principle he talks about in there, as far as to give value to other people, you get value in return. And it's an interesting concept to me, but I think there's certainly merit wherever you place giving, to having a legitimate heart for giving to other people and to giving to causes. I know you and I have talked about where we like to donate to Operation Underground Railroad, and there's people that donate to their churches for tithing, and lots of places that you can help out. But anytime you're giving money away, I know in Scripture it talks about when you give money away with the right intentions, it comes back to you a multiple. And that is a powerful wealth building principle of giving. And I know there's a couple books behind me on my bookshelf behind my green screen that talks about these things as well. And the principles that when people give with no attachment to receiving something, there's not like, I'm going to give because I want money back. It's, I'm going to give because I legitimately want to share the abundance that flows from me. When that happens, then naturally more abundance comes back. And it may not always be monetary. It may be in health. It may be in relationships. It may be in a lot of different areas of your life. But that's just one of the things that always strikes me about baby step 7 is the giving comes and shows up there, which is such a very powerful thing. And, building wealth, I think, the part of that I want to touch on before I turn to you is, why are you building wealth? If you ask that question, like, are you just doing it to arrive at a number on paper, or are you doing it to achieve, feelings and experiences and have the life that you want to live? Because, we talked about earlier, buying your net worth and increasing your cash flow. If I can do that at age 30 or 40 and have the life that I want, then that skill set and those financial tools can carry me all the way through. I don't have to wait till this destination of retirement to get to this wealth built achievement step of having the $1 million portfolio or beyond, to where then my life can kick in and I can begin to do more of the things that I want to do. So if you're thinking about building wealth, I would challenge you to really why am I wanting to build wealth, and what am I wanting to build it to? Is it this $1 million portfolio just for retirement, or am I wanting to do certain things with it? Because I know a lot of people, I was on the west side of Michigan the last couple of days visiting a few clients over there, and they drive by this church on one of the main drags into Spring Lake, Michigan. And there's this huge church there, and there's I think it's like the pastor and a couple other people. They're actually billionaires that run it, and they do a ton of philanthropy work. They give everywhere. They do all kinds of stuff. And a couple of my friends over there, they used to go to that church. So that's kind of how I know the story behind the church. And, you would never notice that because the people aren't flaunting their money, but they have built wealth with a purpose. And the purpose is with giving and to help out, their community. And they do things, on a global level as well with missions and stuff. And so I would just
Nice.
challenge everybody that, if you're building wealth, make sure, it's in connection with something deeper. It's for, I've seen a lot of the memes on social media that talk about, I built wealth not because of the amount of money, but because it unlocks freedom. It unlocks experiences that I can have that without that money, I can't have those experiences. I can't go through and have those memories with my kids or, do the things that I really want to do that are near and dear to me. And I think that's ultimately, like you said earlier, Matt, life is short, it's unpredictable. Make the most of the time you've got. So what's your thoughts on the
100%.
last baby step?
Yeah. So first off, like the building wealth part, I'd have to look at that baby step a little bit more because to me, like everything that we've been talking about up until this baby step is all about building wealth. The first few steps were creating a foundation so that we can actually build wealth but at the end of the day, I guess that also that what does building wealth mean to you as well? But I don't know that building wealth is something that we wait to do at the end. It's something that we're doing throughout the entire process. And I guess same thing with giving. And I think in the beginning though, like if you're on baby step 1 or 2, I mean, if you really want to give back to the world, I mean, we do have to kind of take care of ourselves first. Like if your financial life is a complete disaster, I mean, you're not really able to give to your fullest potential, and not anywhere close to it, right? So you have to get your affairs in order first and your finances in order first if you really want to make a pretty significant impact. Now, that's not to say though that you have to wait until the end to give. And there's also different ways to give. You could give of your time, right? I'm going to an event on Saturday. I'm part of this motorcycle group, and once a month they go downtown and feed homeless, right? So stuff like that. We're doing like downtown cleanups and just various different events. So you could give of your time as well, and I think that has some magical power in it as well when it comes to receiving. But making sure you're doing it not to receive. It's because you actually genuinely want to help make the world a better place, right? So it's not just monetary giving that that we can do. It's also giving of your time throughout the wealth building process. And but yeah, I mean, if you follow these steps and you really focus on building your financial future, you don't have to be super wealthy to make positive impact in the world. It's like I'm not super wealthy, but I'm pretty efficient with what I'm doing right now. I followed like everything that we've discussed today, and I'm in a pretty good position, even though I don't make $1 million a year, right? So the person that makes $1 million a year can do more with that than I can, but I could still contribute. Operation Underground Railroad is near and dear to my heart. I think it's a great organization, and I give to it regularly. So you don't have to wait till the end to do it. But just also making sure that you're putting yourself first as well, making sure that you're in a position to actually give the way you want, and that comes down to following the steps and the different variations that we've discussed today. And then at the end of it all, hopefully we arrive to the altar with pretty significant amount of wealth. We've done well for ourselves, and now we can pass that on to the next generation. We can pass a large portion of that on to our favorite charity and give back to the world, leave the world a better place than when we arrived. So yeah, that'd be my final thoughts on it.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, those are all excellent points. I think as you touched there on kind of the legacy part, it makes me think back to my conversation with the clients last night, talking to them about legacy, and they were saying that is very, very important to them. And it's important to a lot of people to be able to pass along what they've been able to create. And I think that's part of the wealth building part that Dave talks about in step 7 that we come from is doing in your lifetime enough to take yourself to a place where you have more freedom and you have that more control, like I talked about, and living a life that you love, but then allowing the next generation, or maybe it's your grandkids 2 generations away, to be able to build on the things that you created and to create this multi-generational culture. And it's something Garrett speaks heavily about, of creating, it's just not amassing money, but doing it with great intention that thinks beyond your lifetime, thinks beyond even your kids' lifetime, thinking generations ahead of what can I do today and in my lifetime to serve my family and the people that my family will impact. I mean, that's a big thought. And then that takes the whole idea of building wealth from just a dollar amount on paper or an arbitrary retirement figure to something that has profound impact. And that, to me, changes the dynamic around why I'm doing what I'm doing. If I'm doing what I'm doing because I love it, and I'm thinking 100 years from now or 150 years from now, I mean, some of the wealthy families on the planet, they're like in their sixth generation of employing a lot of the principles we're talking about, where they're using the death benefits that come from whole life insurance to replenish and build and expand. And you can get into what those families are doing, whether it's good or bad for the planet, totally different discussion. At the end of the day, their family has a mission and they're doing things that are expanding that every single generation. And so I think we can take a lot of those same ideas that they're employing and doing it probably on a smaller scale. We're probably not talking, billions and billions of dollars that we would amass, but hey, you never know. Maybe you doing what you're doing right now in your lifetime, setting things up, might not mean your kids, but maybe your grandkids, they'll become a world changer and have some global business because you, the grandfather, set things up in motion for them to have the opportunity to go after something that they felt like they needed to do. They were placed here to do that. So absolutely, you never want to minimize the big picture, because it's easy to just talk about retirement in your lifetime, but the whole legacy discussion, I mean, I had never heard this until 7 years ago or so when we got into all this with infinite banking. And then it's like, oh my gosh, this is like a spiritual process that you can go through to massively impact the next generation, not just with money that gets transferred, but mindset and principles and a way of thinking and a way of being and a way of going about what you're doing and why, and connecting intention and purpose with how you show up in the world. That's a big deal. And to be able to transfer those things generationally, not just the money, is a complete game changer. And so that's kind of my final thoughts on this whole thing of going through, Dave's steps. And, I'll be quite straightforward. I don't read a lot of Dave's content, and I'm sure he's probably got more things that are maybe in alignment with the wealth discussion and the generational thing. I'm not 100% sure. I know a lot of the stuff I've seen from him on social media, he doesn't touch on that. But I certainly hope he does, because it's such an important thing to be thinking, of what's to come. And I know one of my quotes that I've heard from Dr. Mercola, he always talks about you build on the shoulder of giants. And so if you can create something powerful and allow the next generation or several next generations to build on top of what you've built, that allows them, I think, to accomplish bigger things and not just be dealing with the same struggles that we've dealt with. Because as I've looked back over my previous few generations, my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, it's like there hasn't been a whole lot of change. We've been relatively the same economic level. There's been no advancements in anything. And I feel like that's part of what I'm here to do, is to kind of shake that up and be like, no, it's time we stop repeating the same things financially and having the same level of thinking. Let's go somewhere. Let's do something more productive with this, because I found in my life, Matt, I don't know if you can attest to this as well, but sometimes when you're struggling, it takes way more energy and way more resources to keep yourself almost at a stuck place in a poverty cycle than it does when you break out of that and start having more freedom and control and more money to do the things you want to do. You can you almost feel like you're pulling back on the stick a little bit. You don't have to put so much into your life to feel like you're just making it, like you're starting to soar a little bit. And, it's like, if we have the choice to pick between those two things, whether I'm going to stay struggling or I can break free from that, and I might have to put in a little extra work for a period of time, but then once you break free, you're doing things from a place of expansion and a place of purpose versus just trying to sludge through. And to me, that's what life's all about, is making those shifts and changes so that your kids and grandkids can just go through, I say it as like a higher level of challenges. They're not going to be dealing with the same challenges we dealt with. They're going to go through things that are at a higher level. And I think that's part of the purpose of why I'm here and doing what I'm doing, with these kind of things that we talk about. So any last final thoughts on this as we wrap it all up?
Yeah, man. Very well said, my friend. Yeah, a couple points. I would agree that, not just the end of the journey, but this entire journey that we've discussed is that of a spiritual one. Because if you think about just starting on baby step number 2, that's a very conscious decision to start moving in the direction of becoming the best version of yourself, or at least a better version of where you're at right now, and wanting something better for yourself, your family, yeah, and maybe charitable organizations or just the world in general, whatever. It starts you on this path that, I mean, you really, you're not going to get to where you want to be without doing the inner work and going on that spiritual journey. And the more you learn and the more progress you make, it just, it, I don't know, in my experience and my personal experience is just what I've seen, it turns you into a better person every single day. And it just becomes this beautiful spiritual journey that you're on that one day you can look back on and like, holy smokes, look how far I came. And, I overcame this. And there's a sense of pride in that as well. And then you could pass that mindset on and those stories on to the next generation as well, not just money, right? And when it becomes about more than just money, now there's some purpose. Now you're living life intentionally, right? There's a strong purpose, a reason that you get up every single day and that you challenge yourself every single day with things that are uncomfortable, right? There's a reason you do it. It keeps you in the game, but it comes from that first initial decision to start that journey. And yeah, I think it's there's a lot of spirituality involved with it, and eventually you become the best version of yourself and having a really positive impact on the planet. So I love it. I think just to wrap up my thoughts on everything, I think baby steps are a great step in the right direction, but eventually it's important to remember that it's time to graduate elementary school, move on to middle, high school, college, right? There's different phases of this stuff. Don't get stuck in elementary school. All right. Make sure you're always educating yourself. Don't think that you have reached the end of the road and that you know everything just because you've completed certain steps. All right. There's always room for growth, always room to learn more. And just make sure, you stay on that journey, continue educating yourself. And I've never seen that end up badly. It always, what I've seen, it always ends up very, very positive. So good stuff.
Yeah, great points. Yeah, makes me think I'll be my last point. I think, as I've listened to a lot of different people, I think one of the principles I was taught many, many years ago was like, who are you listening to? Who are you taking advice and counsel from? And be mindful of who you're getting that from, because, and having a contrast, having a wide array of perspective on different topics. And so like when it comes to finance, I agree 100%. Like you've got to be able to look at the people that fly around in private jets, the guys that have, real estate, like the Grant Cardones, the Alec Hermosis, all these different guys that are living life to the fullest, the Russell Brunsons, all these guys that are making 8-9 figures, right? And just crushing it. Comparing what they say and how they talk about money and the different decisions they make to like a Dave Ramsey, not that one's right or wrong, but it gives you perspective and allows you to find, your truth, for a better, lack of a better term, of what resonates with you. And you have to have that spectrum, and you have to be listening to a variety of sources from different viewpoints to really figure out like what resonates with me, because you might listen to us and it doesn't quite resonate. That's totally cool. Go find somebody that does. But if this stuff does, of course, resonate with you and you want to know more of how to implement these types of things into your life, reach out to Matt. He's got a great channel on Millennial Wealth Creator. I'll put the links to his channel down below in the description here. Reach out to me. We can help you with working through some of this stuff, figuring out your values and beliefs. That really comes first, and getting to know your situation, and then seeing what types of financial strategies and tools allow you to accomplish the goals that you want to, in your life. So there'll be links in my bio for that, to be able to schedule a time and talk over that stuff. Obviously, look through our YouTube channels. There's a lot of great content that we both have on our channels individually. We've done a lot of great content together, sometimes together in the DR. And make sure you've subscribed to both of our channels, hit the notification bell so you're alerted when we do create more content around the different things we're learning and doing and helping clients with when it comes to growing wealth and doing more efficient things with our money. So thanks for hopping on with me tonight, Matt. Always a pleasure, my friend, and we'll look forward to the next time. Take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you later.
See you in the next one. Thanks, Jeff.